March 21st, 1945. 0947 hours. Aboard the aircraft carrier USS Essex, 150 miles southeast of Kyushu, Lieutenant Junior Grade Ralph Yause's radar scope shows 18 targets inbound, bearing 310 degrees, range 54 miles, altitude 18,000 feet. Standard Japanese Betty bomber formation. But something is different. The targets are moving slower than usual, struggling, as if carrying impossible weight. Tally-ho, bogeys at Angels 18. They're hauling something big. What Yause doesn't know is that beneath each of those Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers hangs 4,718 pounds of technology that will redefine desperation. The Yokosuka MXY-7 Ohka, literally cherry blossom, is strapped to the bellies of those struggling aircraft. A piloted rocket with 2,645 pounds of trinitroanisole explosive warhead, terminal velocity of 650 miles per hour, zero margin for error, and a success rate that would prove to be 0.35%. The pilots inside those Ohkas have already written their final letters home. They know the mathematics. Each man has calculated his flight time from release to impact, approximately 90 seconds at maximum speed. Some have calculated longer glides, stretching their last moments to perhaps 5 minutes if they conserve rocket fuel and manage their descent perfectly. But none have calculated what American fighter pilots are about to demonstrate. That engineering brilliance combined with suicidal courage still loses to industrial mathematics and defensive firepower when the delivery system is fatally flawed. At 10:02 hours, 18 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers carrying their human-guided missiles approach the outer defensive perimeter of Task Force 58. They are flying at their absolute ceiling, 18,000 feet, struggling under loads they were never designed to carry. Each Betty normally weighs 20,944 pounds fully loaded. With an Ohka attached, they weigh 25,662 pounds. Their cruising speed has dropped from 272 miles per hour to 196. Their maneuverability is almost non-existent. They are flying coffins carrying smaller flying coffins. Commander David McCampbell, leading a division of Hellcats from Essex, sees them first against the cloud deck. His combat report, filed 3 hours later and preserved in Naval Aviation Archive Record Group 38, notes, enemy bombers showed unusual ventral bulges, large, streamlined objects painted dark green, initially assessed as drop tanks. Subsequent observation revealed cockpit canopies, manned weapons. What McCampbell is witnessing represents the final evolution of Japanese aerial warfare philosophy. When conventional tactics fail, when pilot training collapses, when fuel and aircraft become impossible luxuries, the weapon itself becomes the delivery system. The pilot becomes the guidance mechanism. Death becomes not a risk of combat, but the operational requirement. The engagement that follows lasts 11 minutes. All 18 Betty bombers are destroyed. None of the Ohkas reach their targets. 0 American ships damaged. The mathematics of this failure, replicated across 50 Ohka missions between March and August 1945, tell the story of how technological sophistication without tactical viability becomes elaborate suicide. Of how engineering excellence cannot overcome fundamental operational impossibility, and of how 852 rocket-powered kamikaze weapons, representing millions of yen and thousands of engineering hours, achieved a success rate lower than random chance. This is the story of the Baka bomb, the stupid bomb, a weapon so technically impressive and operationally useless that American sailors gave it a name mocking its futility. It is the story of 55 men who flew the Ohka in combat, of whom only 3 successfully struck their targets. It is the story of mathematical certainty meeting mechanical reality, of how 650 miles per hour means nothing when you never get to accelerate, and of how the most sophisticated guided weapon of World War II became the symbol of strategic bankruptcy. The conception begins not with military necessity, but with mathematical desperation. September 1944. Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal. Lieutenant Junior Grade Mitsuo Ohka sits at his drafting table, surrounded by calculations that all reach the same conclusion. Conventional kamikaze attacks are failing at rates exceeding 90%. Imperial Navy aviators flying standard aircraft, mostly Mitsubishi A6M0s, and Yokosuka D 4 wide-duty dive bombers, are being shot down before reaching targets by American fighters, and defensive fire so dense it creates physical barriers of steel. Ohka's engineering background informs his analysis. He graduated from the University of Tokyo in 1941 with a degree in aeronautical engineering, specializing in high-speed flight dynamics. He understands the mathematical problem facing kamikaze pilots. Current suicide aircraft approach targets at 230 to 280 miles per hour. American radar detects them at ranges exceeding 50 miles. Fighter interception occurs 30 miles from the fleet. Ships open fire at 8 miles with 5-inch guns, 3 miles with 40mm Bofors, 1 mile with 20mm Oerlikon cannons. The mathematical window for penetrating this defensive layering at conventional speeds has closed. Ohka proposes a solution based on pure physics. If terminal velocity increases to 650 miles per hour, American gunners have insufficient time to track and destroy the weapon. At 650 miles per hour, an aircraft covers 950 feet per second. Human reaction time averages 0.25 seconds. Mechanical gun laying requires another 1.5 seconds minimum. The mathematics suggest a weapon moving at such velocity could penetrate point defense before effective engagement. His proposal reaches Ensign Tadanao Miki, aeronautical engineer at the Technical Arsenal. Miki expands the concept into formal specifications. The weapon will be a piloted glider with rocket boosters for terminal velocity. It will carry the largest warhead possible within the structural limitations of a 16-foot wingspan. It will be air-launched from a Betty bomber at maximum possible distance from the target. The pilot will guide it through its glide phase, fire rockets for final acceleration, then impact at speeds no conventional aircraft can achieve. The concept approval comes from Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi, architect of the kamikaze strategy. Onishi reviews Miki's calculations on October 3, 1944, in his office at Imperial Navy General Staff Headquarters. The meeting lasts 47 minutes. Captain Motoharu Okamura, 341st Air Group Commander and aggressive advocate for special attack doctrine, attends with detailed operational assessments. Onishi asks the essential question: what is the projected success rate? Miki's response, preserved in declassified Japanese naval aviation records, is brutally honest. With proper training, adequate launching distance, and favorable conditions, we estimate 30 to 40% successful strikes. 30%. A success rate 3 times better than conventional kamikaze attacks, which by October 1944 have fallen to approximately 11%. The mathematics seem compelling. Build 1,000 Ohkas, achieve 300 hits on American capital ships, potentially sink or cripple 150 vessels. The strategic calculus appears sound. What Miki cannot predict, what no engineer sitting in Tokyo in October 1944 can calculate, is that American defensive capabilities will evolve faster than Japanese offensive doctrine. That radar-directed fighter interception will destroy carrier aircraft before they reach launch range. That the Betty bomber carrying an Ohka will become the most vulnerable target in Pacific skies. That the 30% success rate assumes the weapon reaches its launch point, an assumption that proves catastrophically wrong. On October 16, 1944, authorization arrives for Project MXY-7. Priority designation. unlimited resources within the constraints of Japan's collapsing industrial capacity. Target completion date for prototype testing, December 1st, 1944. Mass production beginning January 1945. Operational deployment, March 1945. The Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal commits to the program. 40 engineers, 200 technicians. Whatever materials can be diverted from other programs, the weapon receives its official designation, Yokosuka MXY-7, and its poetic name, Ohka, cherry blossom. The symbolism is intentional, beautiful, brief, inevitable in its falling. The engineering of apocalypse. The Ohka that emerges from Yokosuka Arsenal represents sophisticated engineering applied to an inherently desperate concept. The specifications tell the story of what happens when talented engineers receive an impossible mission and deliver technically brilliant solutions to fundamentally unsolvable problems. The airframe measures 19 feet 10 inches long with a wingspan of just 16 feet 5 inches. Total weight fully loaded reaches 4,718 pounds. Of this, 2,645 pounds is the warhead, a massive Type 5 No. 25 Model 1 bomb filling modified for airframe integration. The explosive is trinitroanisole, more stable than TNT under high G acceleration, with detonation velocity of 20,500 feet per second. The warhead alone carries more explosive than 16 standard 250-pound bombs. The cockpit sits immediately behind the nose cone, a cramped space measuring 37 inches long, 23 inches wide, 31 inches high. The pilot sits on a minimal canvas sling seat with no armor protection, no parachute, no survival equipment. The instrument panel contains 7 instruments: airspeed indicator, altimeter, turn and bank indicator, dive angle indicator, firing switch for rockets, arming switch for warhead, and a simple compass. No radio, no oxygen system. At terminal velocity in the thin air above 15,000 feet, pilots would experience hypoxia, but the 90-second flight time makes this irrelevant. Dead from impact before oxygen deprivation matters. The control system uses conventional elevator and rudder surfaces with oversized control horns to provide adequate authority at high speeds. The pilot's control stick operates through a direct mechanical linkage with no hydraulic assist. At 650 miles per hour, control forces become immense, requiring both hands on the stick and legs braced against the rudder pedals. Flight testing reveals that course corrections above 500 miles per hour induce G-forces exceeding 7.5, enough to cause tunnel vision and reduce consciousness in pilots already stressed by oxygen deprivation and combat conditions. The propulsion system defines the Ohka's capabilities and limitations. 3. Type 4. Mark 1. Model 20. Solid fuel rocket motors mount in the tail section. Each rocket produces 1,764 pounds of thrust for approximately 9 seconds. Total impulse 47,376 pound-seconds. Combined thrust reaches 5,292 pounds, more than the entire weight of the aircraft, providing a thrust-to-weight ratio of 1.12. This enables acceleration from 230 miles per hour to 650 miles per hour in approximately 10 seconds, generating sustained G-forces around 4.2. The rockets cannot be throttled or shut down once ignited. Pilots fire them in sequence, 1, 2, or all 3 simultaneously depending on tactical situation. Standard doctrine calls for firing 1 rocket to accelerate through fighter interception zones, then the remaining 2 for terminal diving approach. The fuel grain composition, potassium nitrate, sulfur and charcoal, bound with asphalt resin, produces a bright yellow exhaust plume visible for miles. American fighter pilots quickly learn to watch for these distinctive rocket signatures. The glide performance without rocket power determines operational viability. Engineers calculate maximum glide range at 50 miles when released at 25,000 feet, assuming optimal glide ratio of 7.2 to 1. Real-world testing reveals actual glide ratio closer to 6.1, reducing maximum range to 43 miles under perfect conditions. With combat maneuvering, defensive evasion, or any deviation from optimal glide angle, effective range drops to 35 miles. This number, 35 miles, becomes the weapon's fatal limitation. The structural design prioritizes strength over weight reduction. The fuselage is primarily wood construction, using Japanese cypress and spruce laminated with phenolic resin adhesive. The nose section and cockpit area employ 8mm steel plating. The wing main spar is laminated wood with steel reinforcement straps. Total structural weight reaches 1,873 pounds, remarkably heavy for such a small aircraft, but necessary to withstand the tremendous stresses of 650 mph flight and impact forces. Wind tunnel testing at the University of Tokyo reveals concerning characteristics. Above 450 mph, the Ohka develops significant longitudinal instability. The center of pressure moves aft, requiring constant forward stick pressure to maintain controlled flight. At maximum velocity, pilots must exert approximately 47 pounds of forward pressure on the control stick. For malnourished pilots averaging 127 pounds body weight, this becomes a severe physical challenge during the critical final approach phase. Lieutenant Karoku Ishikawa conducts the first unpowered glide test on October 31, 1944, released from a Betty bomber at 12,000 feet over Sagami Bay. His post-flight report, preserved in technical arsenal records, notes, control response adequate to 180 knots indicated. Above 200 knots, control forces become excessive. Above 240 knots, lateral control marginal. Would not want to attempt combat maneuvers above 250 knots without powered control surfaces. The first powered flight test occurs November 22, 1944. Ensign Kazutoshi Nagano volunteers for the mission, understanding the significant risk. Released at 15,000 feet, he fires one rocket motor at 8,000 feet, achieving measured velocity of 387 mph. Control response remains manageable. At 5,000 feet, he fires the remaining two rockets simultaneously. Acceleration is violent. Nagano blacks out briefly from G-forces. The Ohka reaches estimated velocity of 578 mph before Nagano recovers consciousness and deploys the landing skid for emergency landing. The skid collapses on impact. Nagano suffers compression fractures in his spine but survives. His report concludes, weapon is marginally controllable at high speeds. Requires exceptional pilot skill and perfect physical condition. Production begins in December 1944 at 3 facilities: Yokosuka Naval Air Arsenal, Kasumigara Naval Air Depot, and a dispersed manufacturing network of smaller workshops. The distributed production approach reflects Japan's adaptation to B-29 raids that have destroyed centralized manufacturing capacity. Target production rate, 100 Ohkas per month. Actual achievement, 68 per month average due to material shortages, labor disruptions, and air raid damage. By March 1945, when operational deployment begins, 155 Ohkas have been completed. An additional 697 will follow by August, totaling 852 weapons produced. The cost per unit averages 38,400 yen, approximately equivalent to $96,000 in 1945 currency, or roughly $1.6 million in 1945 currency, 2024 inflation-adjusted terms. Total program cost exceeds 32.6 million yen, more than the construction cost of a Mogami-class heavy cruiser. The engineering achievement is undeniable. Japanese engineers have created a guided weapon capable of 650 mph terminal velocity, carrying a warhead sufficient to sink any warship afloat, with guidance accuracy limited only by pilot skill. It represents advanced thinking about precision strike warfare, decades ahead of contemporary weapons development. The operational flaw is equally undeniable. The weapon requires launch from a vulnerable aircraft operating within 35 miles of heavily defended targets. A requirement that proves impossible to achieve against American defensive capabilities in March 1945. The delivery problem manifests immediately. The Mitsubishi G4M2E Betty bomber, modified specifically for Ohka operations, represents the weak link in the entire system. Engineers strengthen the bomb bay structure to support 4,718 pounds suspended from 4 attachment points. They add release mechanism hardware, control linkages for the pilot communication tube, and structural reinforcement to the fuselage to handle asymmetric loading. The modifications add 847 pounds to the Betty's empty weight. The performance degradation is severe. Standard G4M2 cruises at 272 miles per hour at 18,000 feet. The G4M2E with Ohka attached achieves 196 miles per hour at 16,500 feet maximum altitude. Climb rate drops from 984 feet per minute to 437 feet per minute. Range decreases from 3,132 miles to 1,678 miles. Maneuvering becomes sluggish and dangerous. The massive ventral load creating pendulum effects during turns that can induce uncontrollable rolling moments. Most critically, the Betty with Ohka attached cannot outrun American fighters. The Grumman F-6F Hellcat cruises at 315 miles per hour, maximum speed 391 miles per hour. The Volt F-4 U Corsair cruises at 346 miles per hour, maximum speed 417 miles per hour. The latest Grumman F-8F Bearcat, entering service in May 1945, achieves 421 miles per hour maximum speed, with climb rate exceeding 4,500 feet per minute. Against any American fighter, the Betty carrying an Ohka has zero chance of escape through speed or climb. Japanese operational planning recognizes this vulnerability. Doctrine calls for overwhelming fighter escort. The March 21st mission launching 18 Ohkas includes 55 A6M0 fighters, 30 as direct escort, 25 as combat air patrol. The ratio of fighter escorts to bombers, 3-to-1, represents the highest protection level of any Japanese strike in 1945. It proves insufficient. Commander John Crommelin, Combat Air Patrol Director aboard USS Enterprise, controls the interception. His radar operators detect the Japanese formation at 62 miles, bearing 318 degrees, altitude 18,000 feet. The formation's slow speed and high altitude signature identifies it as a bomber strike. Crommelin vectors 48 Hellcats from 3 carriers to intercept 0.47 miles from Task Force 58. The engagement begins at 10:14 hours. Lieutenant Eugene Valencia, leading VF-9 from Lexington, makes first contact. His division of 4 Hellcats attacks from above and ahead, diving through the fighter escort to strike the Betty bombers directly. Valencia's combat report describes the tactical situation. Bandits were carrying large external stores, severely limiting maneuverability. They could not evade or effectively defend themselves, like shooting training targets. The defensive response fails completely. The Zero escorts, already outmatched in 1945 by weight of American numbers and superior aircraft performance, cannot protect the vulnerable Bettys. Within 6 minutes, 11 Bettys are burning. 3 more attempt to release their Ohkas early, hoping the weapons can glide to targets from 44 miles distance. None reach the fleet. 1 impacts the ocean after the pilot apparently loses consciousness during the prolonged glide. 2 are destroyed by patrolling destroyers using 5-inch proximity-fused shells. 4 Bettys attempt to continue toward the fleet. At 10:27 hours, Commander James Swope's division from Essex intercepts them 23 miles from the nearest carrier. All 4 are destroyed within 90 seconds. One Betty explodes catastrophically when machine gun fire detonates its Ohkas warhead in flight. The 2,645-pound explosion vaporizing both the bomber and its escort fighters in a fireball visible for 30 miles. The mission results represent complete failure. 18 Ohkas launched, 0 hits, 18 Betty bombers destroyed, 17 Zero fighters lost. Total Japanese aircrew casualties, 171 dead. American losses, 3 Hellcats damaged by defensive fire, all returning safely to their carriers. 0 American ships damaged. The mathematical analysis is devastating. The mission consumed 18 Ohkas at 38,400 yen each, 18 irreplaceable Betty bombers at approximately 400,000 yen each, and 55 Zero fighters averaging 120,000 yen each. Total material cost, 8,591,200 yen, plus 171 trained aircrew. The return on investment, 0. Captain Okamura, commanding the 721st Naval Air Group responsible for Ohka operations, receives the operational reports at Kanoya Air Base on the evening of March 21st. His response, recorded in unit diary preserved at the National Institute for Defense Studies in Tokyo, is remarkably candid. The Americans have solved our tactical approach. They intercept our formations beyond Ohka range. We cannot close to launching distance. The weapon is useless if it cannot be delivered. The second major operation, launched April 12th against American forces off Okinawa, demonstrates that March 21st was not an anomaly. 9 Bettys carrying Ohkas, escorted by 47 fighters, attempt to penetrate to within 35 miles of the invasion fleet. American radar-directed fighters intercept at 51 miles. All 9 Bettys are destroyed. 0 Ohkas reach launching distance. 1 Ohka, released at 54 miles in desperation, glides for 18 minutes before impacting the ocean 11 miles short of the nearest destroyer. The pattern repeats across subsequent missions. April 16th, 6 Bettys, 0 launches, 6 destroyed. May 4th, 7 Bettys, 2 successful launches from extreme range, 0 hits, 7 Bettys destroyed. May 11th, 4 Bettys, 1 successful launch, 0 hits, 4 Bettys destroyed. The fundamental mathematics are inexorable. American radar detection ranges exceed Ohka launching range by 15 to 20 miles. American fighter cruising speeds exceed Betty maximum speed by 95 to 150 miles per hour. The temporal window for the Betty to close from radar detection to launching range, flying directly toward radar-equipped carriers with hundreds of interceptors under ground-controlled direction, simply does not exist. Commander David McCampbell, Navy's top ace with 34 confirmed kills, summarizes the tactical situation in his post-action report from USS Essex dated April 17, 1945. The so-called Baka bomb presents no operational threat to the fleet. The delivery platform is too vulnerable. The weapon never reaches launching range. Recommend continued fighter interception at maximum range. The enemy will exhaust their bomber force attempting impossible missions. McCampbell's assessment proves prophetic. Between March 21st and August 15th, 1945, Japanese forces attempt 13 major Ohka missions. Total Bettys lost, 76. Total 0 escorts lost, 193. Total Ohkas successfully launched at targets within tactical range, 50. Total hits on American vessels, 3. April 12th, 1945, 14:02 hours, USS Manat El Abele, Destroyer D, D-733, operating radar picket station number 14, 12 miles northwest of Okinawa. The ship has been at general quarters for 7 hours, repelling 5 separate kamikaze attacks. The crew is exhausted, ammunition stocks depleted. The 5-inch guns have fired 347 rounds. The 40mm mounts are down to final magazines. Seaman First Class Lawrence Delowski, manning the port 40mm mount, sees it first. a small aircraft, much faster than normal, diving almost vertically from 8,000 feet. The characteristic yellow rocket exhaust trail. Baka bomb, starboard quarter, high angle. The Ohka pilot is Flight Petty Officer, 2nd Class Saburo Dohi, age 19, graduate of the Yokosuka Youth Pilot Training Program. His Betty bomber released him from 23,000 feet at a distance of 31 miles, having penetrated American fighter screens by flying through clouds and using the morning sun for concealment. Dohi has spent approximately 4 minutes in unpowered glide, managing his descent angle to position himself above and behind the destroyer. He fires all 3 rockets simultaneously at 8,000 feet. The acceleration is catastrophic. The Ohka reaches 612 miles per hour in 8.7 seconds. Dohi barely maintains consciousness against G-forces approaching 6.8. His training emphasized not blacking out during this critical phase. He has practiced on a centrifuge at Yokosuka Arsenal, spinning at forces exceeding 7G until his vision tunnels and his peripheral awareness collapses. Now he experiences it in combat, the world compressing to a narrow circle of sky and ocean, and the grey shape of the American destroyer growing impossibly large. The Abel's Combat Information Center tracks the inbound threat but cannot generate a firing solution. The vertical angle is too extreme, the closing velocity too high. The 5-inch guns cannot elevate sufficiently. The 40mm mounts attempt tracking, but the Ohka passes through their engagement envelope in 1.7 seconds, insufficient time for effective fire. At 14:02 hours and 34 seconds, the Ohka strikes Manat El Abele, approximately 20 feet aft of the forward funnel, penetrating completely through the destroyer before detonating. The 2,645-pound warhead explodes inside the engineering spaces. The blast vaporizes the forward boiler room, severs the keel, and breaks the ship's back. The destroyer breaks in half within 47 seconds. The forward section sinks in 3 minutes. The after section remains afloat for 7 minutes before capsizing. Casualties: 79 dead, 35 wounded from a crew of 336. The second confirmed hit occurs May 4, 1945, against the destroyer USS Shea, DD-750, operating Picket Station No. 12. The circumstances differ significantly from the Abele strike. The Ohka pilot, Ensign Toshihiko Tanabe, age 22, a former engineering student at Keio University, releases from his Betty at 18,500 feet and 38 miles distance. His approach is shallow angle, approximately 35 degrees, conserving rocket fuel until final approach. Tanabe's tactical innovation is targeting from an oblique angle rather than vertical dive. He fires 1 rocket at 5,000 feet to accelerate through the destroyer's 40mm envelope, then the remaining 2 rockets at 1,200 feet for final approach. His speed at impact reaches 574 miles per hour. The Ohka strikes Shea's port side amidships, penetrating the hull but failing to detonate the primary warhead. The impact kinetic energy alone, 4,718 pounds traveling at 574 miles per hour, generates force equivalent to 1,840 pounds of TNT. The structural damage is severe but not catastrophic. The Ohka punches a hole measuring 11 feet by 8 feet in the port hull, floods 2 compartments, kills 27 crew members, wounds 91. But Shea remains afloat. Damage control teams stabilize the flooding within 40 minutes. The destroyer maintains 15 knots and navigates to Karamaretto for emergency repairs under her own power. The third and final confirmed Ohka hit represents the weapon's only achievement of its design objective. May 11, 1945, 08:47 hours. Destroyer USS Hugh W. Hadley, DD-774, Picket Station No. 15, operating with Destroyer Mine Layer Evans, DM-25. The ships have been under continuous attack for 93 minutes. They have shot down 23 kamikaze aircraft. ammunition stocks are critical. The crew has been at battle stations for 11 hours. Flight Warrant Officer Kiyoshi Ogawa, age 23, graduate of Tsukuba Naval Flying School, former instructor pilot with 740 flight hours, leads a 3-aircraft Ohka formation. His tactical approach demonstrates sophisticated understanding of American defensive patterns. The 3 Bettys approach from different quadrants, forcing the defending fighters to split their interception effort. 2 Bettys are shot down at 44 and 39 miles respectively. Ogawa's aircraft penetrates to 27 miles before encountering Hellcats from USS Bunker Hill. Ogawa releases his Ohka while under attack at 16,800 feet and 27 miles from the picket station. The release is premature by doctrine, but the alternative is certain destruction. The Ohka enters a powered glide, using only 1 rocket motor to extend range. Ogawa navigates through American fighter patrols by flying at wave-top height, literally 10 feet above the ocean, below radar coverage and visual acquisition range. At 8 miles from Hadley, Ogawa climbs to 800 feet and fires his 2 remaining rockets. Terminal velocity reaches 623 miles per hour. The shallow approach angle, approximately 22 degrees, makes tracking nearly impossible. The 5-inch guns cannot depress sufficiently. The 40mm and 20mm mounts engage, but the extreme speed defeats effective tracking. The Ohka strikes Hadley's starboard side aft of the main superstructure at frame 138. The warhead detonates perfectly. The explosion destroys the after-engine room, the after-fire room, ruptures fuel tanks, ignites ammunition magazines. The blast lifts the entire after section of the ship approximately 15 feet before settling back. Casualties: 30 killed instantly, 47 mortally wounded, 79 additional wounded. Hadley remains afloat through extraordinary damage control efforts, but never returns to combat. Repairs require 7 months. The destroyer is decommissioned after the war ends. These 3 hits represent the total operational success of 852 Ohkas produced, 50 launched in combat. The statistical analysis is unforgiving. Success rate of launched weapons, 6%. Success rate of weapons produced, 0.35%. American vessels sunk, 1. American vessels mission killed, 1. American vessels damaged but operational, 1. Return on investment, calculated against program cost and aircrew casualties, catastrophically negative. The human dimension of the Ohka program emerges from personal documents, diary entries, and final letters written by pilots selected for the special attack units. These materials, preserved by families and later donated to Japanese military archives and memorial associations, reveal men who understood the mathematical futility of their missions, yet flew anyway, bound by duty, honor, and the crushing weight of cultural expectation. Flight Petty Officer, First Class Ichiro Hayashi, age 21, wrote in his diary on February 17, 1945, while training at Konoike Air Base. Today, we practiced entering the Ohka cockpit. The space is smaller than I imagined. No room to move. They showed us the instruments, 7 gauges. That is all. I asked instructor Yamada how we navigate to the target. He said we don't. The Betty pilot positions us, then releases. After that, we point the nose and accelerate. The training emphasizes not passing out during rocket acceleration. They have us spinning on a centrifuge until our vision fails. Then they spin us more. Nakamura-san vomited blood yesterday. They sent him back to training today. The selection process for Ohka pilots targeted young, small-statured men who could fit the cramped cockpit. Minimum age 18. Maximum height 5 feet 7 inches. Maximum weight 145 pounds. The criteria reflected engineering constraints, not tactical considerations. The average American carrier pilot stood 5 feet 10 inches and weighed 165 pounds. The average Ohka pilot stood 5 feet 4 inches and weighed 127 pounds. malnourished by 1945 standards, weakened by protein and calorie deficits that reduced physical resilience and cognitive function under stress. Ensign Hideo Suzuki, age 20, former law student at Waseda University, wrote to his parents on March 8, 1945, "Tomorrow we receive our final briefings. They tell us the Americans call our weapon Baka bomb, stupid bomb. They mean this as an insult, but perhaps they are correct. To fly a guided bomb at ships defended by hundreds of fighters and thousands of guns may indeed be stupid. But what choice exists? We have lost the war industrially. Our only advantage is spirit, willingness to trade one life for one ship. The Americans value their lives too much to make this trade. Therefore, we must make it for them." The training program at Konoke and Kanoya air bases emphasized the minimal skills required for Ohka operations. Pilots received no instruction in takeoff or landing, as the weapon had neither capability. Training focused on maintaining consciousness during high-G maneuvers, visual target acquisition, and control inputs required for diving attacks at extreme speeds. Total training time averaged 18 hours, including ground instruction. Contrast with American carrier pilots receiving 300 hours minimum flight training before combat assignment. Flight Warrant Officer Takeshi Kasai, age 24, exceptionally old for an Ohka pilot, wrote in his diary on April 3, 1945, "We flew a training mission today in the Betty bombers. I sat in an Ohka mock-up while we flew to the practice area. The sensation of hanging beneath the bomber is terrible. You feel the turbulence violently. The aircraft sways and rocks. You sit in darkness, waiting, wondering if today the attachment will fail and you will fall into the ocean still attached to the weapon." The practice release was at 8,000 feet. The mock-up, filled with concrete to match weight, dropped away cleanly. We watched it fall. It seemed to take forever to hit the water. Then a small splash and nothing. That will be me in a week. The psychological toll of certain death approached differently by different men emerges clearly from these documents. Some embrace death through nationalist ideology, writing of honor, divine wind, and sacrifice for the emperor. Others displayed resignation, fatalism, recognition that their deaths would achieve little, but that refusal meant dishonor worse than dying. A minority expressed despair masked by formulaic patriotic language that fooled no one. Flight Petty Officer, 2nd Class Yoshio Nakamura, age 19, wrote to his sister on April 10, 1945, "You asked me if I am afraid. Yes, I am terrified. Every night I dream about the moment of impact. They tell us it will be instant, that we will feel nothing. But I wonder if that is true. Will I feel the moment when the American shells tear through the Ohka? Will I be conscious when the warhead explodes? They say no, but I think they are lying to make us feel better. Tomorrow I may find out the truth. I hope I prove brave. I fear I will fail at the critical moment, that my hands will freeze on the controls, that I will disgrace my family and my training. This fear is worse than fear of death." The operational reality diverged dramatically from the romanticized sacrificial narrative promoted by military leadership. Pilots faced not glorious death in combat, but mechanical failure, premature interception, and frequently death aboard the Betty bomber before ever reaching their weapon. Of the 178 Ohka pilots who flew combat missions, 123 died aboard their Betty bombers, shot down before release. Only 55 actually flew Ohkas in combat. Of these 55, only 3 successfully struck targets. The remaining 52 died either in crashes during extended glides, shot down by anti-aircraft fire, or impacting the ocean when they lost consciousness during rocket acceleration. Flight Warrant Officer Nobuo Tsubaki, age 20, kept a detailed diary throughout his training and combat deployment. His final entry, dated May 3, 1945, one day before his death, captures the resignation pervading Ohka units by late war. "We know now what the Americans do to the Betty bombers. They intercept far from the fleet. They destroy the bombers before we can release. Yamada-san Squadron, all 18 aircraft destroyed last month. None got close. Nakamura-san Squadron, 9 aircraft destroyed in April. None got close. Tomorrow is my turn. 12 aircraft. I will not get close. I will die in the Betty or in the ocean after early release. The weapon itself is magnificent, the fastest aircraft I have ever seen, but we never get to show what it can do. The Americans are too strong. They have too many fighters, too much radar, too many ships. We have spirit and courage, but spirit does not defeat machines when the machines outnumber us 50-1. Tsubaki died aboard his Betty bomber on May 4th at 11:38 hours, shot down by Hellcats from USS Yorktown at 47 miles from Task Force 58. His Ohka was never released. American encounters with the Ohka weapon progressed from initial surprise through rapid tactical adaptation to contemptuous dismissal. The learning curve, measured in weeks rather than months, demonstrated American naval aviation's capacity for rapid threat assessment and doctrinal evolution. The first American awareness came from intelligence reports in February 1945. Captured Japanese documents from the Philippines referenced a new special attack weapon, piloted rocket. Naval Intelligence Assessment ONI 63, dated February 23, 1945, concluded, enemy appears to have developed rocket-propelled kamikaze aircraft. Specifications unknown. Operational capability uncertain. Recommend heightened awareness and fighter interception at maximum range. The intelligence proved accurate, but incomplete. The March 21st raid provided first concrete observation. Commander John Crommelin's after-action report described new Japanese weapon observed. Small aircraft with rocket propulsion carried by Betty bombers. Extremely high speed, estimated 500+ knots. Pilots appeared to release weapons prematurely when under fighter attack. None reached the fleet. Recommend continued long-range interception to prevent delivery aircraft from reaching launching range. The tactical response solidified within days. Fighter direction doctrine evolved to emphasize interception of Betty bomber formations at ranges exceeding 50 miles, before they could reach Ohka launching distance. Radar operators received specific briefing on Betty radar signatures, particularly the distinctive return caused by the ventral Ohka, creating asymmetric radar reflections. Fighter pilots received priority targeting instructions. Betty bombers carrying Ohkas represented the highest priority threats and should be engaged before conventional kamikazes. Lieutenant Eugene Valencia, who personally shot down 4 Ohka-carrying Bettys, described the tactical situation in an interview conducted in 1986. The Baka bomb scared us initially. Anything moving at 600 miles per hour scared us. But the delivery system was the joke. The Bettys were slow, unmaneuverable, and completely defenseless with those things hanging underneath. We learned to spot them immediately, the way they labored to maintain altitude, their sluggish responses to our attacks. It became target practice. The poor bastards couldn't defend themselves, couldn't run, couldn't maneuver. They just flew straight and level until we shot them down. The contempt embedded in the American nickname Baka bomb, literally stupid bomb in Japanese, reflected tactical assessment rather than cultural prejudice. American aviators understood the engineering sophistication of the weapon itself. What they judged stupid was the operational concept, attempting to deliver high-speed weapons from vulnerable, slow platforms against a fleet defended by overwhelming fighter strength and radar-directed interception. Commander David McCampbell's assessment report, dated May 7, 1945, synthesized the American tactical response. The MXY-7 Ohka represents impressive engineering and desperate tactics. The weapon itself is formidable. If delivered successfully, it would likely destroy or severely damage any ship. However, the delivery platform is catastrophically vulnerable. The G-4M Betty bomber, carrying an Ohka, cannot penetrate our fighter defense in depth. Our doctrine of long-range radar-directed interception prevents the enemy from reaching launching range. Recommend continued focus on destroying delivery aircraft. the weapon itself poses minimal threat if it cannot be delivered. The anti-aircraft gunnery community reached similar conclusions. The 3 successful Ohka hits all occurred during complex multi-axis kamikaze attacks when defensive attention was distributed across multiple threats. When the Ohka approached in isolation, the weapons proved vulnerable to conventional anti-aircraft fire despite their high speed. The proximity-fused 5-inch shells, already devastating against conventional aircraft, proved effective against Ohkas during glide phase when speeds remained below 400 miles per hour. Captain Frederick Mosbrugger, commanding Destroyer Squadron 54, wrote in his tactical analysis dated June 2, 1945, "The rocket bomb requires perfect conditions for success. The carrying aircraft must penetrate to within 30 miles of the fleet, itself nearly impossible given our fighter coverage. The pilot must survive release, navigate through anti-aircraft fire, and maintain consciousness during rocket acceleration. The margin for error is 0. Compare this with conventional kamikaze, which requires only that the pilot point his aircraft at a ship and maintain course. The rocket bomb is sophisticated, impressive, and fundamentally impractical." The most penetrating American analysis came from Technical Air Intelligence Center, Pacific Ocean Areas, Report 45-39, dated July 15, 1945. Based on examination of recovered Ohka wreckage and interrogation of captured Betty pilots, the assessment concluded, "The MXY-7 represents advanced thinking about precision-guided weapons. Its technical specifications are impressive. However, the Japanese have solved the wrong problem. They created a weapon capable of penetrating point defenses through speed, but failed to solve the delivery problem. The Betty bomber cannot deliver the weapon to launching range against competent fighter opposition. The Japanese would have achieved better results using the engineering resources to build conventional fighters or improve pilot training. The Ohka program represents resource allocation failure at strategic level." This assessment proved prophetic. Post-war analysis revealed that the resources consumed by Ohka production could have produced approximately 420 A6M0 fighters or 310 Mitsubishi J-2M Raiden interceptors. Either alternative would have provided more operational value than 852 Ohkas that achieved 3 hits. The Ohka program's failure transcended tactical disappointment to illuminate fundamental flaws in Japanese weapons development philosophy and strategic decision-making in the war's final year. The numbers tell an unforgiving story about resource allocation, operational design, and the mathematical impossibility of the mission concept. Production statistics reveal massive resource consumption for negligible return. Total Ohkas completed, 852. Total cost, 32,668,800 yen, equivalent to approximately $81.6 million in 1945 currency, or $1.36 billion in 1945 currency, 2024 inflation-adjusted terms. Material requirements included 68,000 board feet of aircraft-grade wood, 38,000 pounds of steel, 12,800 pounds of explosives, 7,600 gallons of rocket propellant. Labor hours exceeded 847,000 across 3 production facilities and dispersed manufacturing networks. Deployment statistics demonstrate operational futility. Missions flown 13. Betty bombers committed 76. Betty bombers destroyed 76. 0 fighters committed 303 as escorts. 0 fighters destroyed 193. Ohkas successfully launched toward targets 50. Ohkas achieving hits 3. Success rate of launched weapons 6%. Success rate of produced weapons 0.35%. Personnel casualties reveal human cost exceeding material loss. Ohka pilots killed 178. Betty pilots killed 228. Betty crew members killed 608. 0 pilots killed 193. Total Japanese aircrew casualties 1,207 dead. American casualties from Ohka attacks: 136 dead, 153 wounded. The exchange ratio: 1,207 Japanese deaths to achieve 136 American deaths, represents devastating asymmetry, even by kamikaze's grim mathematics. Comparative effectiveness analysis against conventional kamikaze attacks demonstrates the Ohka's failure to achieve projected improvements. Standard kamikaze operations in April-May 1945 achieved hit rates of approximately 8.5%, success rate defined as causing damage requiring repair. Ohka hit rate: 6%, lower than the conventional approach it was designed to improve. Cost per hit for conventional kamikaze: approximately 120,000 yen for the aircraft, training and delivery. Cost per Ohka hit: 10,889,600 yen, when amortizing total program cost across 3 successful strikes. The failure to achieve projected 30 to 40% success rates stems from systematic errors in the original operational analysis. Engineers at Yokosuka Arsenal in October 1944 calculated success rates based on several assumptions that proved invalid by March 1945 when operations began. They assumed Betty bombers could approach within 35 miles of targets with fighter escorts sufficient to suppress American interception. This assumption failed completely. American radar detection ranges exceeded 60 miles. Fighter interception occurred at ranges exceeding 40 miles. No Betty formation carrying Ohkas successfully penetrated to optimal launching range against competent fighter opposition. They assumed Ohkas released at 35 miles could glide to targets with minimal exposure to anti-aircraft fire. This assumption also failed. Maximum practical glide range proved to be 27 miles, and pilots needed to reserve one rocket motor for acceleration through fighter zones, further reducing effective range. They assumed American defensive fire could not effectively engage targets moving at 600+ miles per hour. This assumption proved partially valid but irrelevant, as most Ohkas never reached high-speed terminal phase. Captain Motoharu Okamura, who commanded the 721st Air Group operating Ohkas from March through August 1945, wrote a remarkably candid assessment in July 1945 while stationed at Kanoya. The document, discovered in Japanese Self-Defense Force archives in 1963, states, "The Ohka weapon itself performs as designed. The fault lies in the delivery system and operational concept. We cannot position the Betty bombers close enough to targets to launch the weapons effectively. American fighters intercept us beyond launching range. American radar detects our formations from distances we cannot overcome with speed or maneuver. The tactical problem is unsolvable with available resources. We continue operations because cessation would admit failure and dishonor those who have already sacrificed themselves. But continuation simply adds casualties without achieving meaningful results." Okamura's assessment identifies the core problem. The operational concept violated fundamental military principles of concentration of force and protection of striking power. Committing vulnerable bombers carrying precision weapons against overwhelming fighter opposition represented compound failure, losing both the delivery platform and the weapon before employment. The proper application of resources would have prioritized fighter production to achieve air superiority, then employed conventional bombs from protected bombers rather than developing sophisticated weapons that could not be delivered. The program continued despite obvious failure because Japanese military culture in 1945 made admission of error nearly impossible. Institutional momentum, sunk cost fallacy, and fear of dishonoring dead pilots drove continued operations long after rational analysis indicated termination. Additional factors included inter-service rivalry, the Navy's determination to demonstrate commitment to offensive action despite strategic collapse, and individual commanders' unwillingness to accept responsibility for cancelling programs that had consumed massive resources. The final Ohka missions flew in August 1945, days before Japanese surrender. On August 13th, 4 Betty bombers carrying Ohkas attempted to attack American naval forces off Tokyo Bay. All 4 were intercepted and destroyed at 53 miles from targets. None launched their weapons. The last Ohka pilots died achieving nothing, their sophisticated weapons never employed, their sacrifices meaningless in strategic terms. The Yokosuka MXY-7 Ohka occupies a unique position in military history. It was simultaneously a technical achievement and operational disaster, evidence of engineering sophistication and strategic bankruptcy, proof that tactical innovation without operational viability produces only casualties. Post-war American technical analysis focused on the weapon's advanced characteristics. Naval Technical Mission to Japan, Report S-01-3, dated November 1945, examined captured Ohkas and interviewed Japanese engineers. The report concluded, the MXY-7 represents advanced thinking about guided weapons and precision strike. Its rocket propulsion system, though primitive by contemporary standards, demonstrates effective integration of solid fuel motors with airframe design. The structural engineering required to withstand 650 mph flight and impact forces shows sophisticated understanding of high-speed aerodynamics. As a weapon system design exercise, the Ohka succeeds. As an operational system, it fails completely due to delivery platform vulnerability. American guided weapon programs in the post-war period incorporated lessons from Ohka analysis. The concept of expendable precision-guided weapons with human or electronic guidance informed development of air-to-surface missiles, cruise missiles, and eventually smart bombs. The fundamental insight that high-speed terminal approach increases penetration probability influenced weapon design through the 1950s and 1960s. However, American designers avoided the Ohka's critical flaw by developing standoff delivery, allowing launching platforms to remain outside defensive engagement zones. Japanese post-war analysis focused primarily on human dimensions rather than technical characteristics. The Ohka pilots who died were enshrined at Yasukuni Shrine alongside other war dead. Memorial associations, formed by survivors and families, emphasize sacrifice and devotion to duty. Technical critiques of the weapon system were largely avoided in favor of honoring those who flew the missions. Some Japanese engineers involved in the program later reflected critically on the operational concept. Tadanao Miki, who designed the Ohka while serving at Yokosuka Arsenal, wrote in 1962, "We created an impressive weapon solving problems that were fundamentally unsolvable given operational realities. We should have told our superiors that the concept was impractical, that no weapon could be delivered against American defenses as they existed in 1945. But the culture of the time did not allow such honesty. We designed what we were ordered to design, and young men died flying weapons that could not succeed." The broader lesson of the Ohka program concerns the interaction between technical sophistication and operational viability. Advanced technology cannot compensate for fundamental tactical impossibilities. A weapon that cannot be delivered to its target, regardless of its technical capabilities once delivered, represents wasted resources. This principle, obvious in retrospect, apparently eluded Japanese planners in 1944, who approved the program based on technical potential rather than realistic operational analysis. The program also demonstrates how organizational momentum and sunk costs distort decision-making under stress. Even after the March 21st mission proved the delivery concept unworkable, operations continued for 5 additional months. Each additional mission consumed irreplaceable resources and killed trained aircrew without realistic hope of success. Rational termination of failed programs requires institutional courage to accept losses and redirect resources to more productive employment. Japanese military leadership in 1945 lacked this courage, continuing operationally bankrupt programs through inertia and inability to admit error. The human cost receives insufficient attention in technical analyses. The 178 Ohka pilots who died average age 20.3 years, represented wasted potential beyond immediate casualties. Many were engineering students, skilled technicians, or experienced instructors, diverted from more valuable roles to fly missions with 6% success rates. The broader pool of 1,207 aircrew killed supporting Ohka operations included Betty pilots and Zero escorts whose survival would have provided more operational value than their deaths achieved. The 3 successful Ohka hits destroyed 1 destroyer, mission killed a second, and damaged a third. These results could have been achieved with far less resource expenditure through conventional kamikaze attacks. The mathematical analysis is unambiguous. Every resource metric, cost per hit, casualties per hit, production resources per successful strike, demonstrates that the Ohka program failed to improve upon conventional approaches it was designed to replace. The story of the Ohka concludes not with technical specifications or operational statistics, but with the men who died inside machines designed for their deaths. Unlike conventional combat aircraft where survival was possible, the Ohka eliminated survival from its operational concept. Pilots who entered those cramped cockpits, strapping themselves into 4,718 pounds of explosives and rocket fuel, knew mathematically that their deaths were not a risk, but a requirement. Flight Petty Officer Ichiro Hayashi, whose diary entries provided earlier testimony, died on April 16, 1945, aboard his Betty bomber, shot down at 42 miles from USS Enterprise. His Ohka was never released. His final letter to his family, written the night before his mission, stated, "Tomorrow, I fly for the Emperor and for Japan. They tell me I will sink an American carrier. I do not believe this. I think I will die before I reach my weapon. But I go anyway because there is no other choice. Remember me not for dying, but for doing my duty." Ensign Toshihiko Tanabe, who successfully struck USS Shea on May 4th, represents one of only 3 Ohka pilots to fulfill their mission objective. His personal effects, returned to his family, included a letter written April 30th stating, "If you receive this letter, I have succeeded in striking an enemy ship. Please do not grieve. I have done what was required. Tell my sister I tried to be brave. Tell my father, I hope I brought honor to our family. Tell my mother I thought of her cooking in my final moment." Flight Warrant Officer Kiyoshi Ogawa, who struck USS Hadley on May 11th, left behind a wife and infant daughter. His final letter, dated May 9th, included practical instructions about family finances, care of his aging parents, and his daughter's education. The closing paragraph stated, "I wish I could see Yukiko grow up. I wish I could teach her to read, to appreciate beauty, to understand honor. Since I cannot, please tell her that her father died trying to protect Japan. Do not tell her that his death achieved nothing. Let her believe it mattered." Flight Petty Officer Yoshio Nakamura, whose diary documented his terror, died on June 3, 1945, when his Ohka impacted the ocean during an extended glide after early release at 47 miles from his target. His body was never recovered. His final diary entry, dated June 2nd, stated, "Tomorrow is my last day on Earth. I am not ready. I do not want to die, but I cannot refuse. If there is an afterlife, I hope it is peaceful. If there is not, then at least the fear will end." These men, and the 175 others who died flying or preparing to fly Ohkas, were not fanatics embracing death. They were young men trapped by culture, duty, and circumstances in a military system that consumed them for minimal strategic gain. Their technical training, their youth, their potential contributions to post-war Japan, all sacrificed to operational concepts that violated fundamental principles of warfare. The mathematics of their sacrifice cannot be reconciled with any reasonable cost-benefit analysis. The 3 successful strikes achieved tactical results equivalent to conventional kamikaze attacks requiring 1/10 the resources. The 49 unsuccessful launches represented wasted opportunities, where the same pilots flying standard fighters might have achieved more through conventional combat. The 76 Betty bombers destroyed carrying Ohkas to their missions could have been employed more productively in reconnaissance, transport, or conventional bombing roles. The engineers who designed the Ohka created technically impressive weapons. The pilots who flew them displayed courage, deserving respect. But the institutional leadership that approved, funded, and continued the program despite obvious failure bears responsibility for deaths that achieved negligible results at catastrophic cost. The Ohka program stands as testament to how sophisticated engineering, without viable operational concepts, produces elaborate mechanisms for converting lives and resources into statistical footnotes. August 15, 1945. Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast ends the Pacific War. At Kanoya Air Base, 18 Ohkas sit on the flight line, fueled, armed, ready for missions that will never launch. Captain Okamura orders them destroyed to prevent capture. Demolition teams detonate the warheads in place. The explosions are visible from Kagoshima, 40 miles away. At Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, 127 partially completed Ohkas await final assembly. Engineers receive orders to dismantle them, to destroy technical documentation, to erase evidence of the program. Some comply. Others hide documents, knowing that history should preserve even failures. In American naval archives, intelligence reports catalogue the Ohka threat. The entries are brief, factual, dismissive. Weapon designation MXY-7. Nickname Baka. Threat level minimal. Operational impact negligible. The analysis is technically accurate, but misses the human dimension entirely. The Yokosuka MXY-7 Ohka failed because it attempted to solve an unsolvable problem. It could not overcome the fundamental mathematics of Pacific naval warfare in 1945. American radar detection ranges, fighter performance, and defensive firepower had evolved beyond the point where any delivery system could reliably position a short-range weapon within striking distance. The engineering sophistication of the Ohka itself became irrelevant when the delivery platform could not deliver. 852 weapons produced, 50 launched, 3 hits, 178 pilots dead, 1,207 total aircrew casualties. These numbers tell the story of strategic failure, of resources consumed for negligible return, of young men sacrificed to operational concepts proven unworkable by March 1945, yet continued through August. The lesson is not that Japanese engineers lacked capability. They demonstrated sophisticated technical understanding. The lesson is that technical sophistication without operational viability produces only expensive failures. That weapons which cannot be delivered achieve nothing. That courage and sacrifice cannot overcome fundamental tactical impossibilities. And that institutional momentum can perpetuate failed programs long after rational analysis indicates termination. The Ohka pilots who died deserve remembrance not for dying, but for the futures they never lived. Engineering students who could have rebuilt post-war Japan. Technicians whose skills could have contributed to recovery. Young men whose potential died with them in rocket-powered machines designed for mathematical certainty of death. The Americans who fought against them demonstrated professional competence in identifying and exploiting the weapon system's fundamental vulnerability. They developed tactical responses that prevented the Ohka from ever realizing its theoretical potential. They proved that even the most sophisticated weapons fail when operational concepts violate basic military principles. The final accounting is mathematical and moral. The Ohka program consumed resources equivalent to a heavy cruiser's construction cost. It killed more Japanese aircrew than American personnel. It achieved success rates lower than conventional approaches. It represented industrial and human resources that could have been better employed in dozens of alternative applications. And it stands as permanent reminder that in warfare, as in engineering, solving the wrong problem with sophisticated means produces failure regardless of technical achievement. The cherry blossoms fell, but they fell pointlessly, their mathematical certainty of death producing only grief and negligible military impact. The Baka bomb earned its nickname honestly. Not because Japanese engineers were stupid, they were brilliant. Not because Japanese pilots were stupid, they were brave. But because the operational concept was fundamentally, mathematically, demonstrably stupid, and no amount of courage or technical sophistication could overcome that basic failure of strategic thinking.